Well, welcome back. Today I'm going to be talking with you about one of the biggest misconceptions that I think people have about walleyes. And before we get to that, as you can see, I already have a group of fish off to my left here, so I'm going to cast right over to them, hopefully pop one quick, and then I'll talk to you about this misconception. You can see it hanging right in those fish. Oh, there the bobber's down. First cast, right on cue. You bet. When it works out like that, so nice, because more often than not, it doesn't. Nice little eater-sized walleye right there. There we go, perfect little eater-sized walleye. You can still see more out there. Well, like I was saying, welcome back. Today we are out in north central Minnesota on a small body of water. This is kind of your typical Minnesota deep, clear body of water. And I'm gonna talk one of the misconceptions that people have a lot of times, and that is the fact that walleyes are always on bottom or close to bottom. I'll pan around here and show you. You can see there's still fish kind of scattered there. There's fish kind of scattered all over we're sitting in 22 feet of water right now. And those fish are anywhere. You can see some back there a little further. Those fish are like 10 to 14 feet down. Those ones over here, there's some that are up as high as 6 to 8 feet. This is kind of that late May post-spawn bite where these fish are just starting to leave from the shallows. You know, they're starting to move out a little bit deeper onto these break lines, and oftentimes when that happens, especially with that first push, these fish are much higher than people think. So I'm gonna show you some of the spots that I'm gonna target some of these high fish, because not every spot or even every lake will fish quite like this, but I'm talking through kind of the lake breakdown and also kind of the locations that I'm finding these fish and why I feel like they are suspended. God, they are all around it. Nothing's wanting to do. Well, that isn't uncommon for what happens. Honestly, when you get on a group like that, even a pretty big school like that, you'll see maybe 1, 2, maybe 3 active fish. Obviously, when it gets going, it can be a ton of fun because a bunch of fish will be active and you can catch quite a few in a short time. But a lot of times, it's what you're doing. You're working from one group to the next, trying to find just some of the active groups. So we're gonna kind of keep moving here, and I'll kind of start talking through some of the areas that we are looking for. As we're kind of moving over to this next spot, one of the tips that I did want to give is, one, when I'm looking for some of these areas, especially when these fish seem to be almost suspended off these break lines, up off bottom quite a ways, I often see that when there's some steep breaks. So I'm looking specifically for these shallow flats, kind of like I was talking about earlier, sand, maybe some weeds up on top as well, but a lot of times sandy or rocky. If you watch my early spring walleye locations video, I talked a lot about that. So looking for that and then finding those steep breaks. And honestly, with your live scope, you can do it with your side imaging 2D as well, but I find it to be more efficient with the live scope, being able to work some of these, pan around as you see these groups of fish, that you can stop, get your boat position depending on what the wind is doing, and that way you're able to make good, accurate casts. And that's another tip I'm gonna say is take the time to get good, accurate boat position. Sometimes, obviously, you can't do anything about it. Sometimes the fish just show up, all of a sudden they're there, and you have to start casting on them. You're gonna spook them if you don't, because the boat's just gonna get too close. So, for example, right now, there is this big flat that I'm gonna be working, and there's kind of like a point on it. So it's a big flat, there's a couple little knobs on it, a couple little points on it. And when I do see that, that tends to be something that these fish are gonna hang around. Maybe it's a transition, maybe it's some rocks, whatever it is, especially if it's on the wind-blown side. So I'm going towards that right now, and I'm actually going around it, so that way I can get around that edge of it, and I can go towards it. I'm gonna be going into the wind when I'm going towards this point. So that way I'm not gonna spook fish, I can get good boat position, and I can spot lock and make accurate casts. So they're about 80 feet. So I'm actually gonna spot lock us right here. Make sure I'm recording on there. These ones are actually up on top a little bit more. They're not quite as suspended off the edge. They actually have kind of pushed up. We've got the wind blowing right into this, so maybe they moved right up on top with this wind, but yeah, you can see a bunch of fish. I'm gonna turn my gain down a little bit to make it a little more clear for you. So I'm just gonna kind of cast. Should be set up pretty good for these fish. You can see, sometimes you're not always able to see your bait, but you can actually see your line. You can see right here, not always seeing my bait, but you can see my line. That way I can kind of get an estimate of where I'm at. And these fish, so far, don't want to do it.
Watch you on YouTube quite a bit.
You bet. Appreciate it, man. What was your name?
Drew.
There's a big school right over here, but just throwing lots of things on them. I'm gonna throw a slip bobber out while we're talking here.
Yeah, throw it out.
Just because I see fish.
Yeah, I mean to impede.
No, you're good, man. You're good. Yeah, this lake does. Oop. There we go. Ooh, my drag. Right? My drag was set super loose, which is funny because I just caught a fish on it. Probably an eater. Oh, we got another one here. We've got Drew over here. Shout out to Drew. He just stopped by saying he was watching some videos. So we were just sitting here shooting the breeze fishing. I was seeing so many fish, I just had to throw the bobber out. So shout out Drew, a little extra luck over here. See a bunch high there. Keep sliding slowly back. Hopefully I don't spook them. There you can see them up. These ones are a little bit tighter to bottom. We'll see here. See if I can get down to them or not. One's coming up right away to look, and not interested. Gonna recast a little more to the left. Pretty close to in that group of fish. One's coming up to take a look. They're not coming up very fast though, that's for sure. Oh, he popped it. There we go. I'm kind of wondering if this is a walleye. Almost seemed a little bassy, but I've been wrong before. Just don't tell my wife. It's a walleye. Nice little eater. There we go, a bunch more up there. Took about the second cast on that one. Like I said, a lot of times you're gonna be able to get one, maybe two of these. Just kind of got back fishing to the next spot. Ended up sitting chatting with Drew there for a while. Super nice guy. Back out now, you can see these ones are actually a little tighter. A lot of these fish have been suspended. You can see as I kind of pan around, some are a little bit up higher, but I don't know if I pushed them up on top of this thing a little more. Like I said, right on the edge of this break, these ones are a little more on the top side of it. Was just cruising the shoreline, got again to another little knob on these flats, another little point on these flats, and that's where these fish were hanging out. Oop, bobber down. There we go. Oh, geez, I can kind of see myself in my GoPro. I know I've been gaining weight, but man, this one feels maybe a little more feisty. Just a little more squirrely. Finally getting a second one out of a group. There we go. Show you what I'm using here in just a second. But whoa, another, just perfect for coming out, getting a meal. But essentially what I'm using here, to kind of show you, especially when these fish are suspended or up off bottom, one of the most efficient ways to do it is with a slip bobber. I upsized a little bit. It was a little windy to start, so I upsized to an 1/8 ounce Norfin tungsten short shank jig there. You can see I have about a 2-foot fluorocarbon leader to my swivel and a little egg weight. This is the Norfin light bite bobber. I like the ones that are weighted. And then obviously to my braided main line. I do like a high vis main line, even for slip bobbers, just because I can see where my bobber is. Sometimes, you know, if I go to look down or go to do something and I can't find my bobber, being able to follow that line and see where it is sometimes helpful. With this cotton on the water, it's become miserable. You can see just all that stuff right there, getting caught up in the line, making it impossible to cast. And tell you what, if you think you're a good fisherman, get your slip bobber caught in the guides or get some cotton caught in the guides, and that will make you feel not like a fisherman very quickly. And I'm not even really going to talk about the rod that I'm using, because this is not the rod that I'm using for the majority of the year. I got a rod coming. I've got the 2B. There's a sharpshooter and the precision shooter, and they are perfect. They're specifically made for slip bobbers, and I absolutely cannot wait. When I heard about these rods, I immediately wanted to pick up like 10 of them, because I love slip bobber fishing. If you've been using live scope, you know how effective slip bobbers are. With live scope, they have the bigger guides, which would be perfect for a day like today. I'm not going to go into too much detail on that because I don't have them yet, but when I do, I'll talk through them, because I'm going to be using them a lot this summer. And I have that on the new Piscifun Illumix 2000. This is a super sweet reel. It is incredibly smooth, very good drag. It's an all aluminum body, and so something I have just started using, playing around with a little bit, and honestly, it might become one of my new favorite reels, that is for sure. So I'm gonna drive and show you what we're looking at on the side imaging when we see these groups of fish. So I'm gonna drive on the edge of this flat. Again, this big shallow flat to my right, kind of drive over until we see fish. Right now I'm in 28. There you can see one little pod. You can see where that hard bottom is. You know, there you can see a few more. These ones are very scattered. Again, another thing to be mindful of is sometimes these are going to be suckers, because just because you see a bunch doesn't mean they're gonna be walleyes. However, there is going to be walleyes mixed in with these suckers as well. Doesn't mean don't cast at them, but don't be surprised if you cast a bunch and they don't bite. And obviously, like you saw today, so far, a lot of these fish aren't going to bite, even if they are walleyes. So wanted to give you a little look at side imaging as well, not just looking at the live scope. So now we're gonna cruise up and head to the next spot. All right, new spot, new shoreline. I got the shallow water off to my left here. And so I'm actually just going to be working along the deeper side of it. I have my live scope at about a 45-degree angle towards shoreline, so I can see a little bit out in front of me, but also so I can see up that break just a little bit. Hopefully that'll give me enough time. Sometimes I will go straight perpendicular as well, and also out in front. This is basically a big shallow flat off this whole side, and every once in a while there's these little bump outs. I'm not even gonna call them full points, which is something that bumps out a little bit, and those are typically that hard bottom to soft bottom transition. And that's where I anticipate that these fish are gonna be. We're just gonna work this whole shoreline, because sometimes they'll surprise where they're at too. Oop, there you can see a group. I'm just gonna let the wind kind of push me off of these fish. Again, take the time to get set up so you can make good, accurate casts and get set up on these fish, because there's been so many times where I've tried to set up on fish that I should not have set up on, and it just does not work out like you should. All right, looks like they are about 50 feet out, about 10 to 12 feet down, up off the bottom again. See how close I got there. Some fish are starting to move a little bit. That tells me that maybe they're either getting spooked or they see me. Especially because they're getting spooked closer. Don't really like that when they start moving closer, which is, bobber down. Something was moving. There we go. Again, this happens so frequently. You get your first cast on these fish with a slip bobber, and they will bite, and we'll just see if we can get any others. This guy's dogging me though. See if you can see him down there. It's so fun seeing these fish in clear water like that. Again, they were mostly off bottom, another solid eater. First cast with that slip bobber happens very frequently. These ones slid back, so now you can see they spooked a little bit. Now they're a little getting tighter up there. Another thing I did want to point out, again, I started further up this break line, but these fish are 100% on that little point of that bump out on this big flat. So a very consistent pattern that we're seeing with where these fish are located. Couple fish looking at it. You see the faintest glimmer. Again, typically if I'm not filming, bobber down. If I'm not filming, I will have my, it popped off. Back what I was saying, I do like to put my gain up when I'm not filming, but for filming just creates a little more clutter, like I said. But then you're typically able to see where your line is, where your bait is a little bit more when you do bump that gain up. So just another little thing to do if you're going out and you can't see your bait. See some fish up way shallow. It is getting a little closer to dark. We still got a couple hours left, but maybe some fish moving up there. Let us slide a little bit closer. I'm gonna spot lock. And with those fish being so tight to bottom, I might throw a Ned rig here. The one thing I think is with these fish being so tight to bottom like that, there's a very good chance that they are, suckers. Yeah, I think those ones are suckers. You can see just tight to bottom like that, up a little bit shallower. Not what I'm looking for right now when I'm looking for walleyes. One thing I didn't talk about, which I'm gonna talk about now, is we're seeing water temps in that about like 57-degree range, which is about what I anticipate for these fish to be starting to move off some of these flats. You know, they're moving off their spawning stuff, moving out to some of these big pods of bait that you're seeing. And so as they do that, they're going to continue working out deep. This is their first kind of big push out to off these break lines. And then probably within the next, 3 weeks or so, we're going to maybe start seeing the first push off to some of that structure. And just as I'm talking, you can see off in the distance a little bit, I'll bump up the gain so you can see that. Just a big stack of bait up shallow over there. So again, kind of what we're looking for right there. Let my bobbers down. Not a big group on that one. A little smaller group. This seems like a decent fish though. Dogging me pretty good. That one was only a group of maybe 4 or 5 fish. But we got one to go here. Solid fish. You can see right on that black 1/8 ounce tungsten jig under the slip bobber. Whoa, that was probably super loud. One more look at that guy. Again, not as big of a group as what we've seen. But you can see about 3-4 fish still over there. But sometimes that's all it takes. And sometimes those smaller groups or even singles are some of those bigger fish. Just so much bait all around this stuff. I mean, you just look at that screen. Oh my gosh. That, you can see why these fish are suspended like this, is anywhere from 12 to 20 feet, just bait everywhere. Slow, 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 slow. I don't even know if this is gonna be a walleye. If it is, it's super finicky. It is a walleye. These ones have just been so finicky. Man, that was, oh, and he popped off right away. I don't know what it is with this crew of fish, but they are, oh, finicky. That one's probably right around that 20-inch mark. Pretty nice fish. As you can see, clouds are getting a little darker behind us, so not sure how much longer we're gonna have. So try to catch a few more here before we have to head out. Another group out there. You can see even these ones aren't crazy suspended like some of those first ones. These ones are probably 2 to 4 feet off bottom. 50 feet. Seeing them start to move. Oh, and I think my bobber's down. Yep. There you saw that one come up. A little bit smaller group again. Got it in the area. Feels like a decent fish. Oh. All of these have just been a nice size. Not getting any big bigs, but also not getting really any dinks. This is fun. I love getting back out, chasing some walleyes on the slip bobber. Well, there you have it. As you can see, a lot of fish suspended. That is just one thing that I wanted to point out because I know not everybody has live scope. I know not everybody can afford it, but I want to pass along some of the information that I've been finding out and that a lot of people have been finding out over the last few years. Again, not every lake sets up like this. This is one of those deep, clear lakes with a ton of bait that pushes out off these shallows. So that is something to look for if you're seeing a lot of bait, you know, not far underneath the surface, especially in these clear bodies of water. You can see that. Go ahead and try some of these tactics. Maybe it's a slip bobber, maybe it's working a lighter jig kind of through the water column. You can see how many suspended fish there are on some of these bodies of water. So I hope that was helpful today. Hopefully you're able to just take a little bit away from this, and the next time you're out, maybe be willing to try something a little bit more out of the box as opposed to just working a jig right along the bottom. As always, appreciate the support. We'll see you next time.